This is part 4 of Toy Town. After the boys left the sporting goods section, they went to the toy department and played with toys that they could never have afforded. They even found a flying carpet. They didn't know how it worked, but they were fascinated by how it was able to carry both of them at once without any engine sound. The ride was so quiet, as they were gliding through the store, they heard a noise. They took the magic carpet ride back to the beds to hide and wait. By this time, they were getting sleepy, but the natural sleepiness was being fought by all the excitement they were having. They waited a while. Then, as they were by this time they were getting sleepy with it. Okay. They waited a while. Then, as they slid out from under the beds to see if it was safe to come out again, they looked up. There, above them, was an adult figure standing there, facing down at them in the dark. "Did you hear the announcement?" The voice pierced through the boys' bodies as they realized they were busted. They feared what the consequences would be. The man turned a flashlight on, shining it on his face. It was Mr. Dream, the tour guide. The boys were not sure if they should be relieved or repulsed. Mr. Dream smiled. "You boys remind me of when I was young man." Johnny began to try and explain. He... Mr. Dream laughed a little as he said, Hey, it's okay. This time." Then he smiled again. "Actually, boys, believe it or not, I'm glad you stayed. It gets lonely down here at night. I know that you weren't trying to steal, break, or destroy anything. You were just having fun. Boys will be boys." The boys felt put at ease, but were still a little on edge. They knew they didn't leave when they were told to. Mr. Dream led them back to the replica workshed/cottage there down in Toy Town. The boys had so many questions and wanted to ask the same questions the whole town had, wondering about the shack on the corner of 13th Street and Dice Avenue, but never had the chance to ask. Questions built up in their minds, and yet there was something about Mr. Dream's presence that caused them to remain silent. He began to talk, and even if the boys wanted to, they couldn't get a word in edgewise. "Boys," he began, as he brushed off some wood-carving tools from the kitchen table, "I want to tell you a story and ask you some questions, okay?" The boys just nodded in agreement. He continued to talk as he set the house in order. "I'm not the original owner of this little toy workshop, the one you see up in your town above. I don't own this basement/town under your town above either. It belonged to the original, the one and only, the real Mr. Dream Maker. I recall back when he invited 12 people here. He met with us as a group, and he met with lots of others too, but I personally recall he finally narrowed it down to just 2 of us. You know, honestly, we all have 2 sides. So in reality, I found myself coming into the cottage to meet with him one-on-one. He was looking for which one of the 2 men would be the best to take over his legacy here in Toy Town." The story was oh so familiar to Johnny. He began to understand that the 2 men in the story his mom told him was actually just the 2 sides of Mr. Dream. Mr. Dream fixed some hot chocolate as he confirmed this. "You see, it was really just me when it came right down to the meeting I had with Mr. Maker. Sitting in front of him, he asked me a question that I had to honestly answer. First, let me ask you two, would you like some skits? And cheese with your hot chocolate? Nick wasn't comprehending anything Dream was saying and asked, Skit? Cheese? The man let out a laugh as he explained, Triscuits and cheese. I shorten the names to skits. They go well with cheese. I'd offer you some wine, but I think that may add to your confusion, my dear boy. Sometimes it's good to shorten things or turn things around, don't you think? Again they nodded and kept listening. Boys, just like there are many types of people in this world, and there are two of you here today, we all have two sides. Maybe more, really. When I sat down with the owner and creator of Toy Town, I was asked one main question that I had to decide how I would respond. So let me ask you two, what would you do if you were in those two men's shoes back when Mr. Maker asked those same questions? If you could live here, what would you I'm sorry, oh my gosh, I'm messing up bad, sorry. If you could live here, what would you do in and with Toy Town? Then he stopped talking, and Nick spoke up right away. Oh, wow! You mean you're asking us? You're asking us to live here, or what would we do if we did take over? Mr. Dream smirked and looked at Johnny. He's the top in his class, I'm sure. Johnny gave a nervous smile back, answering, no, not really. Maybe you should repeat the question. Mr. Dream said softly, I'm asking you, my dear charming boy, what would you do if Old Man Dreammaker asked you to live here and be part of Toy Town? What would you do here, once assuming some type of ownership in this town? Nick was taken back a little and felt put in his place by Mr. Dream's sarcasm. He didn't let that stop him from answering with full pride. Well, I was thinking about that today. This place is awesome, and I love how you kept it a secret. And, Nick, before you get too carried away, first answer the question, insisted Dream. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I know exactly what I would do. I would open it up to the public, not only for tours, but everything would be for sale, and I would make it like an amusement park and become a millionaire. Imagine the fortune I'd make. Everyone would look at me different and treat me better because I would be the boss. I'd live like a boss, too. I'd have more money and things than anyone. Nick was proud of himself and his answer. Mr. Dream asked, I see. And what would you do with the money? Nick looked at him strangely and said, Huh? Are you serious? I would do whatever I want to do, and I would be the richest man in the whole world, and I could just be like in control of people and all this stuff. Other people would pay me, and I'd make lots of money off of them. Not only that, but I'd have a say on who can come in and who couldn't afford to. If you ain't got the cash to give me, then forget it until you give me enough to get in. I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Nick. You'd become wealthy and everyone would buy stuff from you so you could get what you want. A money-making thing. Yeah, Nick answered, but with less confidence and just a little hesitation in his voice. Not sure why that was such a bad thing. Mr. Dream turned to Johnny. And you, Johnny? What side do you take if given Toy Town? Johnny answered a little slower and with more thought. Well, Mr. Dream, to be honest, I think I would do the same thing you did. I would ask Old Man Dreammaker what he was working on and what he wanted for the future and go from there. Johnny wasn't telling Dream what he had heard his mother or just what he thought Mr. Dream wanted to hear. His answer was sincere from his heart. Mr. Dream could tell that. They were led into the foyer and were invited to sit in front of a fire. They sat there. They sat with their hot chocolate and enjoyed Triscuits with some fake cheese on top. Then Mr. Dream shared a little more as he confessed and clarified a few things. Boys, I only sent out 2 invitations. They were to be given when I was finished. I wanted Johnny to come with one other very special person. All the other people invited themselves. They either made their own or bought an invitation ticket from someone who convinced them that it was legit. Then he went back to telling the boys the rest of the story regarding the day he met with the owner and creator of this amazing place. I had to decide which of my 2 sides to listen to. Part of me was bound and determined to make this place the biggest thing ever for myself and everyone else. The other part of me knew I had to follow what the original genius wanted in order for it to be the kind of place Mr. Dreammaker wanted. Selfish reasons and rationale never benefit anyone but that self-centered person. Only one of my 2 sides had the same vision as the one who started it all. It wasn't even based on what I could offer. Only one side of me was willing to sacrifice everything in order to join the founder and build Toy Town. It came down to not what I could give, but based on what I was willing to give up. In exchange, everything else that would prevent me from completing this mission had to be changed. My selfish ways, the way I functioned at my job, some of my friends, and even my own family, who wouldn't allow or accept the changes. Johnny said softly, with his head hung low in deep thought. That's what my dad did. He left us, and I'm not sure why. Mr. Dream raised Johnny's head with his hand and said, Johnny, I'm talking about a man who thought things would be better in a land filled with toys, imagination, and happiness, just to find out that he lost everything and that no one can create the most perfect, happy, and peaceful town. I'm talking about me. Johnny looked into Mr. Dream's somber face and said, Mr. Dream, if that is what you did, it sounds like you're saying that you are my dad. Mr. Dream's eyes filled with tears as Nick watched on and heard him say, Yes, Johnny, I am. Johnny stood up from his soft easy chair, knocking his hot chocolate on the floor as he shouted, You're not Mr. Dream. Why would you leave me and Mom? Mr. Dream stood up. Johnny, you have every right to be angry. I am not Mr. Dream. I just took on part of Mr. Dreammaker's name when I decided to take ownership here in Toy Town. I am Johnny Maynard, Sr. I was living in a dream world here. I realize now my decision, although it seemed worthy and right, it was foolish. Our name is just Dream, spelled backwards. I chased this dream so far, deep and long, only to find out I'd left behind what everyone wants, everyone needs, what some people will never have, a family, a home and a hometown that provides lasting love, peace, belonging, and true joy. Happiness and fun are temporary. That's what we provide here in Toy Town. But real joy and priceless laughs with friends and family are forever. No matter how hard it may be, I, no matter how hard uh, it was, maybe I could have kept my family and still accomplished things down here, where imagination and dreams come true. Johnny dropped to his knees. Mr. Dream, I mean, Dad, his voice was choked up. I understand now, but I do have one question for you. Mr. Mayrd said nothing. He just opened his arms and waited for Johnny to ask. How can Mom and I, when can Mom and I move in and make this our home? Mr. Meard's answer kind of shocked Nick and Johnny. As soon as I shut down Toy Town and build a real home. Johnny cried, No, but Dad, the factory, the future, the toys, and the fun it brings. We can't just kill those plans. Son, I did all this for you, our family, and other kids and their families. But in doing it, I actually forgot and lost what my family and childhood is all about. It's not a surface happiness. A home is a temporary building. A house is a temporary building, but a home comes from within our hearts. Community, unity, and togetherness isn't found in a building or a town. Feeling like you belong comes from acceptance, no matter where you live. Buildings only last so long, but belonging is forever. It's time to go home now. After that day, the cottage on top of Toy Town was shut down. No one went in, and no one came out. The foundation of the Mayrd family was still there, but Mr. Mayrd himself had to start all over again, building up trust, forming the bond that he broke so long ago. Mrs. Mayrd knew the second invitation was for her, but she didn't see any progress and assumed that her estranged husband may never return. When Mrs. Mayrd met with her son's dad, they were able to come to an agreement. Eventually, their family unit moved back into the old cottage. They began to work together on the surface and subsurface. The old rumors of the place were revived. However, now Nick was offering the truth of his own personal testimony. Johnny's mom was so glad to see her husband had come to realize that life was right here in their hometown, not miles below the surface. And yet, she realized that there could be so much more to their lives if they not only lived in the same house, but worked together. They were in two different books, but finally got onto the same page. They shared the same dreams for Toy Town's future as they tried to figure out how to share it with other people. They were about to meet with the press, but in the meantime shared one-on-one with those closest to them. Johnny's uncle moved in, and Johnny finally met his uncle's friend, the man that helped break up the fight when Johnny took the invitation away from Phil. They told Johnny that they visited Toy Town but didn't want to live there until now. They realized now this was a place intended to be lived in all the time, not just dream about and occasionally visit. Johnny still had a lot of questions. He asked his dad, "Why did you just why didn't you just work in Toy Town and come home at night?" Mr. Maynard tried to explain. "At the time, I and your mom didn't want that, but now we're willing to accept each other and come to share agreement that is fair for all of us. Son, it's only when both are willing to work together on both sides that your relationships with others will work. Both individuals have to be unselfish in order to find self-satisfaction. I'm not sure if you fully understand just now, maybe someday, but years ago, I couldn't live anywhere else but here in this old cottage and below in Toy Town. Your mom, you, and really the whole town only knew the cottage up above on the street level. No one could see anything more. Everyone assumed this was an unsafe, scary, dirty place, and that this cottage was no place to raise a child. Dedicating one's life to something means giving some things up, but you will need to be involved with things around you too, in this world, but not of it. To be a real asset to the world, you have to stay true and dedicated to yourself and whatever you feel called to accomplish. However, you also need to be available to your friends and family. When I came and stayed here, I shut everything and everyone else out." His voice said, "I understand, but you may not have completed everything here if you had not done that. My son, Mr. Dreammaker, already accomplished everything. I was just a steward, a caretaker. Now, we three will share in this same manner. Just live here, enjoy, and take care of things around us. Now, we need to find others, like your uncle and Bill, his friend, who want to do the same, but not to become materialistically rich and gain financial wealth. Rather, just live and enjoy this new, rich life. Remember, a dream is not just something that goes on when you're sleeping. You can have dreams, goals, wishes, desires, and hopes while awake and fully alive in this new town, this new world. It's not just a world of our own. We will share it and develop realistic goals, but only with those who are sincere. Toy Town is for all who want to be part of what Mr. Maker wanted from the start." One night, the father, his wife, their son, the uncle, and Bill were sitting in front of the fireplace in the little cottage they now called home, when there was a knock at the door. They all looked at each other, wondering who it might be. It was Nick and his family. They asked to come in and find out more about what Mr. Maker's plans were for Toy Town, and find out how they could be part of those original plans. As they sat and enjoyed a mutual conversation, there was another knock. Johnny wondered if it was Phil or some of the other kids from school. They were all on their Christmas break. Mr. Maynard got up and answered the door. It wasn't any of his friends, but it was the young business executive who came to the cottage with the ticket he bought from some friends, the one who never even made it to the basement. He was dressed to impress, suit coat, tie, shiny shoes, as he bid Mr. Maynard good evening. He then employed his plea. "Mr. Dream, I'm here to work with you and or for you. I'm willing to purchase this old shack from you." Mr. Maynard said, "I have one question. Why?" The gentleman could hardly suppress his enthusiasm. "I will do everything and anything to make this work and build Toy Town to become known as the biggest and the best money-generating corporation ever. I know what you have down below, and I want in." Mr. Meard knew he had to burst this man's bubble on what it takes to be part of Toy Town. He said, "Sir, you already live in this town. You're part of it. You have ownership. You can't become any more involved in this town, in this whole investment. The only thing you need to do is become more aware of your existence and part. Also, sir, you didn't really answer the question." "What do you mean, Mr. Dream?" the man argued in disgust. Mr. Meard said, "I am Mr. Meard, not Mr. Dream. I'm asking you why. Why would you want to take ownership, control, and be a vital part of Toy Town? Is it just for what you can gain?" The guy was fed up and let down. He felt that he deserved more and couldn't identify with this whole Toy Town philosophy. Some spit came out of his mouth as he bellowed, "I expected more. I told you what I would do to get rich and famous and make this and this whole town famous. I'd generate more money than anyone could imagine. I could make you the wealthiest man alive." Mr. M looked back over his shoulder at his family, sitting, just waiting for him to come back and join them. He saw Nick and his family waiting to finish their conversation. He looked back at the executive, trying to execute his personal agenda, and asked, "Do you feel that's a worthy purpose? Riches are far more than what monetary things can buy." The businessman replied, "You're out of your mind." They watched as the man just turned and walked away. Johnny's dad noticed the wedding band on the man's left hand. He just shook his head in dismay, closed the door, and went back to his family. His wife said, "I wasn't sure if you were ever going to come back." He replied, "I never really left. You and Johnny, you're the most important thing in this world to me." Nick asked, "But Mr. Mayrd, why did you leave your family?" Nick's mom and dad were embarrassed and tried to tell Nick that was personal. Mrs. Meard's husband looked at her as he gave the answer to Nick's question. "I do need to try and give an answer for things I've done in my past. Back when I decided to live here, I thought that the only way for me to carry on was to be away for a while. I left and worked on the inside of this cottage and all that is deep within. As you know, there is much more than what we see around us here on the surface. I'm so glad we can all live here now. Now you can be sure that I'll never leave again, because this life is now truly and totally complete." The end. I'll put down in this description several things, but I want to offer my deepest thanks to my wife for doing her best to understand me and how I am and how I want to be, and also to all my dear, dear children, Kiri, Alex, Olivia, Maddie, Abby, and even my stepchildren, Christopher and Carol Ann, who cherish our love for each other regardless of our geographic differences, as well as to all my entire family and friends for all their support. I'll put links down below to the YouTube reading of stories and to other stories that I've written that aren't recorded. This story, is just kind of pretend, but there's and make-believe and fictional, but there's always a lot of metaphors that I write, and sometimes they come out and I don't even see them myself until later. I hope that you enjoyed this and that you'll enjoy some of the other stories that are being read on here. Thank you again so much. God bless you. Go with God.